So do you think you've successfully thwarted shirtless summer?
I'm hoping. I mean, it's what, 95 degrees outside? Sure,
Yeah.
it's still on for the time being, so we're doing okay.
Yep. We'll just have to see what
Yep.
happens.
I mean, if my AC breaks, then all bets are off.
That would be terrible. Let's not put that out into the world.
Yes.
All right, Daniel. I have as I slowly, quietly move my water around the table.
Yeah, I can hear all of that.
I have a pre-show for you.
This again.
I got new shoes. Did you see my shoes?
I did see your shoes. It kind of looked like you were messing with them, like they didn't quite fit the way you wanted.
The heel
I saw you kind of pulling
like
on them a
little when I was walking. The heel's a little interesting, but these are. I shouldn't be wearing these. I'm breaking one of my cardinal rules, which is when you buy running shoes, only run in them and don't use them for anything else because they're your running shoes and not your everyday shoes.
Yeah. What do you think you're doing?
I wanted to break them in a little bit, and I have like this possible foot injury that I'm trying to kind of ease out of, and these are a lot more squishy than my standard shoes, and so I was like, well, I'll do that, and then also I gotta like slightly break them in.
Fair enough.
I had Daniel running shoes. It's like gear, but for your feet.
Yeah. People get real into that stuff.
No, I previously had the same Fresh Foam X New Balance running shoes. And I was like, I've been really happy with these. I don't know if you've ever stood in a Fresh Foam X New Balance running shoe.
I have not.
But it's like standing on clouds. They are very squishy, which like...
I'm sure even that's a debate too, right? Because, there's some people that run in those stupid looking 5-finger shoes and stuff, which have like no support.
Right. Well,
and then meanwhile, you're over here running on clouds.
Yeah. And pluses and minuses too. I apparently there's more like foam shoes that New Balance makes now, and I was like, no, I want the 1080s, and so the lady grabbed the Fresh Foam X Moors,
The 4Ks instead of the 1080s.
Yeah, the 4Ks, and those were like if the clouds were on clouds.
Oh man!
And I was like,
is that too much even for you?
I was like, ma'am, can't do this. If you've never ran like foam shoes, it's great for like the really long miles and just kind of like easy running. But if you're not used to it, they feel a little less stable until you kind of settle in.
Yeah.
And so if you're not careful, you can have maybe a little more inclination to roll your ankle. I've never had that problem in these shoes, but like the possibility is there.
Sure.
And then also it absorbs some kinetic energy. And so like they will kind of slow you down.
Yeah, but maybe they're better on your knees or something though, right?
Yeah, sure.
Lower
it's
impact.
kind of like for a trainer where you're going to put, 1,000 miles into them. Maybe like probably a little better for you. It's just on race day, maybe these aren't necessarily race shoes, which I did wear my Fresh Foams for my other race. But I was like, I've been really happy with these shoes. What does the internet think about them? Don't do that. If you're happy with something, never ask the internet if they're happy with it.
That's a good general rule.
Just about everything.
Yep. So did you replace did you get that same shoes again?
Yeah, I had the version 11, then I bought the version 13. I bought the same shoe again. But when I was asking the internet, I was like, what about these shoes? They're like, they're really comfortable and like good for your long runs. Like you're going to go run 15 miles or something, but they're not race shoes because they like, it just feels like they're slowing you down. And so I was like, maybe I need to get race shoes. I bought the same shoe this time because I was like, I know I'm happy with the ones I have. I know it's going to be really good. And I'm going to be doing a lot of training miles. But for like my next race, I should get race shoes.
Yeah, if you really want to be competing, if you want to have a chance of winning.
Yeah, well, come on. I need 2 pairs of running shoes. Now, this is like spec bumping where you always have to top yourself. I swear 5 years ago race shoes weren't a thing. It was like, just buy some running shoes. Well, what's a running shoe for your running shoe? That's a race shoe.
Well, that's basically part of why Olympic records keep getting broken, right? Because the technology just gets better.
Yep. It's just like, wow, man, I get all this data when I shoot in log. What's better than log? Shooting in raw. Race shoes are like running in raw. Maybe that's nice. Barefoot.
Very nice.
Wait. Anyway, so I was looking at these race shoes, sorry, and one of the distinguishing features of a race shoe is you can get these with carbon fiber plates in the shoe.
What does that do?
And so like if you imagine like bending a carbon fiber plate and how it like pops back to be straight, that's what it does. And so when you're running and like you kind of, as you bend your toe and articulate the plate, it wants to snap back straight and it gives you bounce.
So it's like a leaf spring.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like it literally like gives you more oomph every step.
It sounds like cheating to me.
Yeah, dude. So that's my plan. I'm going to cruise in these puppies, which are going to slow me down a little bit. And I'm going to, feel comfortable and happy.
It's like running with ankle weights.
Yeah. And then I'm going to get myself a pair of like freaking Nike $350 running shoes, race shoes, sorry. And then I'm going to like go 30 seconds faster every mile.
You're going to have to report back on that.
Anyway, so I'm wearing my new running shoes today.
Which don't have carbon fiber plates.
No, but they are squishy and fantastic.
Nice.
I don't know if New Balance makes like shoes that are not running shoes but also have the squishy, because I would wear these every day. I swear it's like walking on clouds.
Why can't you wear those every day? Like what is the characteristic of those shoes that makes them not suitable for everyday use?
They're just not everyday shoes. They're running shoes. Like when you go into the store and you say, this is a funny story. There's a guy I used to work with who went into the store and he's like, I need to buy a pair of tennis shoes. He bought the pair of tennis shoes. He went and played tennis in them and the sole ripped off. And he went back and said, your tennis shoes are bad. I played tennis in them and they didn't work. And they're like, well, those aren't tennis shoes. He goes, so help me. Oh boy. Words are hard. Yeah. So these are running shoes. They're not like shoes.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like you could you could daily those shoes.
If I daily these shoes, the sole would probably rip off because they're not daily shoes. They're running shoes.
Gosh.
If you're not running, you're. Yeah, boy. Oh, the other thing is these are 6mm drop.
Oh, yes. I know what that means.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
you seem very excited about these shoes.
I was going to go deep into how I drop matters, but we're not going to do that right now because we have a pre-show.
Someday we'll get to actual cameras.
Yep. When I was driving to work earlier this week, I was just thinking, as I do, and I thought to myself, I wonder how Daniel's liking his max size phone, because he was not a max size phone person, and then he was, and then he wasn't again, and now he is again.
That's true.
And so it's been like almost a year, 9-10 months. What do you think about the bigger screen size?
Well, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned this because I replied to somebody on Twitter today that was talking about the telephoto lens and how nice it is. And I'm very happy with that on that phone. And that's basically why I bought the Max phone, was because it has the 77mm 5x telephoto.
Yeah.
And it's the only iPhone that has that. And I'll keep buying Max phones as long as that's the only way you can get that telephoto, because I like having the telephoto. So I'm happy with the device itself. I think the screen size is pretty good. It's hard to one-hand it. I noticed, like, if I need to tap something at the top of the screen, I kind of have to shift my grip on the phone, which is kind of annoying. I mean, I've gotten used to it. But I think for normal use, it's just better. I mean, you can see more stuff, and it still fits in my pocket fine. I don't feel like that's that big of a problem anymore. So I think I'm pretty happy with it.
For a lot of people, it's like a total non-starter.
I know.
Like it's just too big, right? I mean, it seems like you don't feel that way. Do you think that if say the next iPhone had, I mean, you're not going to buy the next iPhone, you're going to keep this phone for 7 years or whatever, but say like iPhone 20, whenever you buy a new phone, if they're like the same camera systems, like, you going to go back?
I don't know. I mean, I also feel like part of the reason I'm okay with the Max is because I don't wear stylish pants. So, I've got nice big pockets. Not really a problem.
Don't have to worry about a phone print.
Yeah. But
the old square on the front of your leg.
I mean, the battery life is better. The screen's just bigger. You can just see more. I think for now, I feel like I'll stick with the Max. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I think I like it.
I used to be a staunch small phone person.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a Galaxy S3 once, and I was like, this phone's too big. And I took it back. Too big. And then later on in life, I bought a Nexus 6, which was like
the biggest phone
anybody's
ever seen.
Yes, it's a whale of a phone.
Yeah.
And it converted me. Big phones. Big phones for life.
I also almost never use a case, which I think helps a lot because it keeps the width as minimal as possible.
Yeah. It's the width that's important as far as keeping that small.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll come out with a folding phone. Who knows?
That would be cool.
It would.
All right. Pre-show.
Almost there.
You got to work on all the jingles for these. Okay. So, and this kind of feeds into our first show topic, but you shot this week and you were like, Lucas, I'm doing this no cage.
Mm-hmm.
You just went out and shot with your X-H2S.
Yep.
no cage,
Yep.
which like never happens.
Mm-hmm.
Why and how'd it go?
Well, so it's actually not the first time I've done that. The last event that I shot before this recent one was at a baseball field, and it was similarly just going out for one night, gonna film a couple of clips, not really a big deal. It's just like for social media.
Run and gun,
Yeah.
lots of people everywhere.
Yeah. And for that, I also took the cage off. And the reason in both cases was just wanted a little bit less weight, didn't feel like messing with my whole camera setup with the, with the monitor and V-mount battery and all that. I feel like the camera is more maneuverable when you can just hand hold it, which is definitely nice in some situations. And yeah, I guess it was that for the first event. And then for this more recent one, a lot of the same reasons. And it was a little bit easier to make the choice because I still didn't have the cage mounted back on the XH2S. And so it was like, well, I could deal with all these bolts and stuff and like put this whole rig back together, or I could just leave it. And so I just left it and it was fine.
When you shoot without a cage, do you use the eyepiece more?
I do, yeah. For certain shots, I feel like it gives you that extra point of contact, right? Like you can brace the camera against your head, which kind of gives you, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more stability. I don't know. But yeah, I do find myself using it more.
Do you find the flippy screen gets in the way?
It can. I wish the XH2S had that one from like the S5 too, where you could tilt it. That would be really handy in some cases, but I don't know. Mine doesn't wobble the way yours does, so it's not quite that big of a deal.
I was strongly on team flippy screen when I didn't have a flippy screen,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that was the correct way to have your screen mounted in all cases. And I would say that now that I have a flippy screen and a non-flippy screen, I prefer tilt screen. I probably in 80% of use cases, even in video.
I kind of agree. Although one thing I really like about the flip screen is that you can close it.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
That makes me feel a lot better if I'm, transporting my gear.
Sure.
But yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I feel like the use case for a flippy screen is if you're doing vlog style stuff, which I never do. I never hold my camera and film myself. If I'm filming myself in a more, like a tripod situation, then I'll just use my monitor on top. So it's not that big of a deal. So I think I agree.
Yeah, there's just a few cases where having that flippy screen be able to flip the whole camera around is nice.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm actually filming myself, so I'm going to do like a bag review, man, I'm still going to pull out a monitor because I need it to be bigger anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like vlogging is the main use for it, honestly.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
But, a lot of people buy cameras and don't vlog.
So I guess what I'm saying is I'm on team tilt screen now.
That's a big change.
Yeah, since you have to pick sides.
Yeah, obviously.
Can't enjoy both.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
I almost added this next topic as a pre-show.
That would have been too far, and it is about cameras.
Yes,
so.
and I was like, I guess this fits in the show. But Daniel, this is our Lumix extravaganza show.
It is.
Where we're going to talk about the S9, and then if we have time, because we spent like 45 minutes on the pre-show and the pre-show and the pre-show, if we have time, we'll get to the GH7.
Yeah, I think we'll have time for that.
So we shot an event thing this week, and then the weekend before that, there was a wedding, and I brought my camera, even though I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, that's a faux pas.
That's like a PSA.
Sure.
Don't bring your camera to a wedding. Just don't.
Yep.
Like I knew this beforehand. I was like, Lucas, don't bring your camera to a wedding. And I just kind of like brought it and like set it over there because I was like MC / kind of DJing. I was like, no one will notice if I just like whip out my 50 to 140 and kind of snap a few pics from over here at this booth table thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, and I took a few pictures. I have debated on whether or not to complain about the photographer on this podcast.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth about that too. I think that, our listenership isn't that big. I think we're probably safe.
Okay, like I'm not gonna like complain. I haven't seen the pictures. I bet the pictures are all fantastic, and she tried really hard and probably did a great job.
But I don't understand. I've never seen a wedding photographer that didn't use a 70 to 200.
Okay, this is my only thing. I've never seen a wedding photographer shoot 90% of the wedding on a 50 millimeter prime.
I mean, she was right there, like
Bold.
like way up in the personal bubble.
No fear.
It was interesting to see.
I think that's like my only comment.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
I thought it was pretty funny because I saw you pull your camera out, not during the ceremony, I don't think, but I guess at the reception, I saw you pull your camera out, and you had more of a telephoto than the actual wedding photographer. I thought that was amusing.
Yeah. I feel like, whoever, like when you shoot a wedding, like you do you, like do what works, to each their own, right? I mean, like each photographer is going to do their own thing. I feel like if you don't know what you're doing, or like you're new to it and you're like, how is the best way to tackle this? It's like 7200 and 24-70.
Yeah.
And like those are your lenses. And if you can afford it, 2 of the same body, 1 lens on each.
Yeah.
And like that's it. That is the kit if you're like getting into wedding stuff.
Yeah.
And then from there, maybe you add the 85 and you add a macro, and like there's your 4 lens kit, and you can go shoot weddings and do details and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, use what you have. And,
but yeah, like use what you have.
Like that may have been the highest, image quality lens that person had. But personally, if I was getting paid to shoot a wedding, I would probably, if I didn't already own a 70-200, I would just build in the rental costs into my fee.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good call. But also, if you're doing like lower budget weddings, you may not even be able to like get that in there. And they may say, hey, like just shoot with what you have. I've seen the pictures you take, and I love your pictures. Just like bring your kit. And if your kit's a R8 with a 50 millimeter lens, go for it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah,
I will say from all the event stuff we've done, I think you can get really far with with just those 2 zooms, like a 24-70 and a 7200.
I think, yeah. I
mean,
like
we do a lot of low light stuff, and so having something that's really really wide, like a really wide aperture, can help. I mean, something like an 85 or like that 75-1.2. There are some situations in low light where that can be really helpful, and a lot of weddings are low light. But if all you had was a 24-70 to 70 and to 70-200, I think you'd be fine.
Oh, definitely. I love primes. I love shooting on primes, but I would definitely agree that most people, most of the time, for general range things, man, those 2 lenses are going to get you mostly there.
Yeah.
There's people who like their work demands long telephoto, or low depth of field, or like macro, and then it's like obviously like there's things outside of it,
of
but
course
there's like a good chunk of work that like those are your workhorse lenses for a reason.
I agree.
I mean, I guess you could just get that 35-150 Tamron.
Yeah,
that
you talk about that lens every week.
I'm telling you, put that thing on X mount. Come on, Tamron. What are we doing?
So you mentioned this wedding, and then you also mentioned that we shot an event last week. Did you want to mention anything?
Oh, I just didn't know if you had any feedback on shooting crowds of people with a camera.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a different sort of deal, because I mean it is basically like a kids' summer camp sort of situation, and I mean, I brought my telephoto with me, the 50-140, and I used it maybe for a couple of shots to get some some detail stuff, but the thing about shooting an event like that, and we've done this for some youth events at church in the past too, is that you can get right in there on those. It's not a problem to get really close to people, and especially with kids, they're usually excited to get filmed anyway. And so I was shooting a lot more wide than I was tight, which is different than most events that we shoot.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I tried to spend a good amount of time on my 50-140 because I wanted a lot of like face and like tight shots to kind of like get some like reactions and energy and that sort of thing. And that can get to be really hard in those like fast moving situations where it's like you're looking around for the thing and you gotta be able to like get in there, frame and focus, which in that case, sometimes for those videos, it makes more sense to use like autofocus and like face detect autofocus, and things where like having a really good AF system like on like a Canon or a Sony or something can actually make some videos like this a little more possible. I definitely shot with autofocus on this one a little more than I normally do. Normally I just like shoot manual focus.
Yeah. I kind of wish I had done that. I did some stuff with the gimbal, with the XT5 on the gimbal, which, that's a pretty good setup. I like using the XT cameras on the gimbal. Just, it's light and you get the dials for adjusting things. That's really nice. I don't think the XT5 is really a great gimbal option, just because if you want to shoot 4K 60, you're getting like a lower quality. You can't shoot 4K 60 HQ. You can only do 4K 30
Right.
HQ. And in any of the 4K 60 modes, you get a crop, which, usually on gimbal, you want a wider shot. So
Yeah, I mean, it's like a 40 megapixel 8K sensor. It's not really.
It's not made for that, but it felt like the best camera I had for that purpose, but I was doing it on manual focus,
Right.
and I kind of wish I had done autofocus. I think it might have gone better.
Yeah, I do wish there was especially on the Fujis, like a better human detection, not just face.
Yeah,
That would be super nice. And then I wish there was an easier way to force it onto which face you want it to be on.
yeah.
Those both can be really annoying whenever relying on autofocus for a Fuji camera. That, and then what was right, if you want like a 40 megapixel, if you want to use that 40 megapixel sensor for video, it feels like the XH2 is kind of like the least compromised version.
Yeah, it's definitely made for that more than the XT5 is.
Yeah, the XT5 is definitely a photo first camera, and it's nice that it has all the video features for whenever you want to use it as a B, but like it's not maybe a cam material for video.
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't think I had any other feedback other than I used my camera cage whenever I rigged up and shot this thing. But my my small HD monitor, this is like the second or third time this has happened to me where it just like turns off.
That's weird.
And I swap the battery out and I can't get it to turn back on.
Yeah, it sounds like there's something wrong inside.
Last time I thought it was broken, and I was like, well, I guess I got to get a new monitor. And then the next day it just turned on fine, and then I didn't have that issue for months.
And it happened again this time. I guess you haven't tried it again.
I haven't tried to turn it back on, but I tried like 3 different batteries in it. I just can't get my monitor to restart. So I don't know why those small HD monitors are a little finicky.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I obviously it's like the whatever the 5. What was the name of that one? The something 5.
Focus.
Yeah, the
Focus 5-inch maybe.
That one. Yeah, that was like their cheap line, which they don't even make those anymore. They're not focused on their pro line monitors that are all like pretty expensive. Yeah. And I would assume that those are maybe more reliable or more durable, but this one hasn't really held up quite as well as I'd hoped it to.
Yeah, same. And I mean, mine has a crack in the bezel. I'm not sure how that happened. I mean, it still works fine, but it's just kind of weird. I mean, that monitor's mostly been outclassed by newer stuff.
Yeah.
But your experience kind of makes me feel the way I felt when I was using that cheapo speed booster on the GH5.
Oh,
where it would, every now and then it would like lose connection to the camera, and it would basically like freeze the camera.
Yep.
Anytime stuff like that happens, I don't like the feeling of not feeling like I can rely on my gear. It's like this is probably going to break at the worst possible time. And I'm trying to film something that's really important.
Oh yeah.
And I just hate the way that feels.
That's why you gotta get that pro gear.
Yeah, or like a 2 is 1, 1 is none type thing.
Sure, definitely.
Certain things like have a backup.
Yeah, that makes total sense. The last thing here, shooting people with like water guns. Boy, that gets risky.
Yeah, that's a little stressful.
There was like one point in time where I was like, "Whoa, camera in the air," because things almost went south.
Yeah. I guess that's when you need weather sealing. But usually your whole camera rig isn't weather sealed. So.
Yeah, exactly. I need to start getting like full weather sealed camera gear. Like we need O-rings around like HDMI ports.
Oh man.
Anyway, okay. One more thing before we get to these Lumixes. How long has it been? Jeez, we're doing okay.
It's going to be a long one.
Oh, geez. No. We're tight 59 minutes. We're on it, Daniel. Getting on that pace. I'm wearing running shoes today. Just pacing it. Actually, I didn't time the pre-show. I have no idea how long we've been going. Okay. I feel like this week I've been like kind of in the background talking you off the edge of buying a 6K cinema camera, Blackmagic.
There was one conversation. I wouldn't say a lot.
So like you've been looking down at this Pyxis camera. Like, man, Lucas, I really need this box cam. And then as you're getting into it, you're like, well, it doesn't seem like it's really worth it over the Cinema 6K standard camera, which I totally disagree, but that's fine. And now you're looking at buying this like Blackmagic Cinema 6K. And I just don't know what you're doing, Daniel.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing either. Just thinking about ideas. That's all I'm doing.
You got nothing,
thinking through ideas.
Nothing else to say here.
Yeah, I mean, so we talked about the Pyxis a few weeks ago, and I think it's a really exciting camera. It's what everybody wanted the Cinema 6K to be when it came out. And the whole box cam thing is exciting for rigging and all that, and it's affordable and it seems like a great camera. And we started talking about like, is that something we're interested in? Shooting in RAW, kind of like getting experience with that like cinema camera workflow. But when you start looking at it, it's just expensive to rig something like that out because like
well, you don't have an SDI monitor.
yeah, that's the biggest thing is that the Pyxis doesn't have an HDMI out. And so you have to buy an SDI monitor to use it because you basically can't. I mean, it has a screen on the side, but you basically you're going to need an external monitor to film with that camera.
Well, sure. I mean, the screen's immobile. I feel like,
And so, but when you consider like the monitor and buying lenses and et cetera, like that's easily a $6,000 setup real quick.
It seemed like to me when we were talking about SDI, whenever we talk about SDI monitors in theory, before it becomes more real and you're just staring down buying an SDI monitor, it's more of like a, oh no, it has SDI, but you say it with a smile on your face because SDI maybe feels more reliable than a wiggly HDMI port.
Yeah, I think it's a more professional connection for sure. But it's just, I mean, you're looking at at least a $500 purchase just for that, and at least where we're at, which is probably where a lot of people listening to this podcast are at in terms of like what gear they have, and mostly shooting on mirrorless and all that. Like I don't have anything else that's SDI, so you'd be buying a monitor that only works on one camera that you have, and that's just a whole extra cost that you have to consider with something like that.
For sure, it's a big ask. Well, I mean, you could, like you said, you could go to Cinema 6K, and then you have to figure out a way to power it because that battery's only going to last like 30 seconds.
Well, what's interesting though about the Cinema 6K, and the only reason that I would consider it is because for some reason Blackmagic has it $1,000 off right now.
Dang!
And so it's $1,600 new.
Really?
Yeah, that's the reason I was saying it's a compelling idea. It uses
that's cheap.
It uses the NPF 570 battery, which that's not going to last long, but it does have a 12-volt power like connector on the side.
Oh,
so it's not like it's not like on the XH2S where you have to use a dummy
battery.
battery. Like you just get the plug and like plug in the 12-volt. I mean,
well, that makes sense.
Pretty reliable. It has a screen built in, which if you wanted to use it handheld, like we were just talking earlier about using a camera without a cage, like if you wanted to get a handheld shot you could do that, whereas like the Pyxis, that's not really a doable thing. It has HDMI out, so you can use a normal monitor. I'm just saying, I think it at the $2,600 normal price, I think at that point it's a lot closer. But I think this is a temporary deal. I don't think it's always going to be $1,000 off. But I think at $1,600, I think it's a much better deal than the Pyxis because the sensor and codec and all that are exactly the same. And it's just like you get a camera that's more going to work with all the things you already have for half the price of the Pyxis.
Other than like being full frame, what does that camera provide that the XH2S does not?
Well, I was going to say the RAW, but I mean, obviously you can shoot RAW on an XH2S. You just record it to a Ninja.
Or a Blackmagic Video Assist.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that if you have a Blackmagic Video Assist, if you're like us and use Resolve, it's a lot closer. I mean, it's full frame. You can record to an SSD. It's another nice benefit.
Isn't that coming to the XH2S sometime next year?
Yeah, as if. That's never coming to the XH2S. It's never going to happen. I think it's mostly just the RAW thing. I think Blackmagic's interface is pretty good. I think it's probably a more suitable camera for doing cinema type stuff. I think it has full timecode support.
Sure.
And I think you get some of those benefits. But I agree, it's a closer comparison if you're ignoring like the rigging advantages that you get with Pyxis.
And some of those like more pro ports and that sort of thing. On a camera that we're going to talk about in a little bit, that GH7, it can record ProRes RAW internally to its CF Express card while simultaneously recording proxies to the SD card. And if you want to record ProRes RAW externally to an SSD, you can. However, you have a lower frame rate / data option. So the SSD, because SSD recording is slower than recording at CF Express.
Interesting.
And so being that the Blackmagic Cinema Camera doesn't have CF Express, that means it's worse than XH2S
But
because the GH7.
But it does have CF Express.
Really?
It has a single CF Express card slot.
Oh, well, then never mind.
That's what
I'll
it
take
has.
it all back.
Yeah.
You should shoot to that.
I don't know. Your mention of the GH7 is kind of interesting in the context of this. So let's set my camera needs aside for a moment and let's talk about the Lumix stuff.
Okay. I have S9 here first, even
Sure.
though the GH7 seems way more interesting and super cool.
I think they're both interesting cameras. So let's start with the S9. That one was announced first.
Okay, yeah, S9. And then we'll see how far we get because there's like so much to talk about here. Okay. I owned a GX7. You owned a GX85.
Still do. Yep.
I guess I also still do. Sits on a shelf, has a scuff in the sensor, or dirt or sand or whatever. And then there was a GX9, and that was the end of that line.
Yeah.
And this was like, maybe not a retro styling, but mine was black and silver.
Yeah.
Kind of cool looking.
Rangefinder style.
Rangefinder style, simple micro four thirds camera.
Mm-hmm.
The GX9, so the latest version, which had IBIS, micro four thirds, rangefinder, small camera, was nearly the exact same size as the new Lumix S9.
Which is crazy because the GX9 was micro four thirds and the S9 is full frame.
Yeah, so the S9 is 2 millimeters wider and 2 millimeters taller.
It's almost, it's not even worth.
It's basically the same size, and it weighs the same, like 486 grams versus 450 grams.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So this one, in like watching all the stuff about this, I was like, why wasn't this just a micro four thirds camera?
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because of lens options, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But this is ultimately a replacement or spiritual replacement to the GX series.
I think you're right. I mean, it's quite a bit more expensive, but it's also a much better camera in terms of being full frame and et cetera. And yeah, it seems like they're kind of trying to hit the same sort of idea as those cameras.
Right. And that's kind of like the hardest thing when talking about this is like, where does it fit and who's it for? Which we'll get to like after we kind of dig through some of the stuff. So $1,500, super duper small, like smaller than an X100 like tiny camera, light, nice, easy, portable. Comes in colors.
The colors are pretty cool too.
Colors are pretty cool. They got this like forest green. They got a red, but it's kind of like a crimson type red. Oh, that's actually what it's called.
Very creative of you there.
Lol. Yeah, I was gonna anyways. And then there's like a blue, which is like a deeper, like a blue.
Yeah. Or you could get it in black.
No.
I don't know why you'd want to do that.
No. Don't. If you're gonna buy this camera, don't buy it in black. What are you doing? Don't buy it in black. I vote red or green. Those two are my favorite of these colors.
I would get the green.
The green looks great.
Yes, it does.
But if you want that pop, go red. I would have a really hard time deciding between the two. I'd probably pick red. Yeah. But we would talk about it on this podcast for 3 hours.
This is like cars. I wish more cameras came in colors. I think it's cool.
Yes, I am all on board. Like the Nikon F and FC.
Yeah.
Boo, yeah. I want one of those in yellow so bad. Like so bad. Anyway, super tiny. Get it in green. And that's basically it. So like as far as input on this thing, it's got like a micro HDMI out. It's got a cold shoe, no hot shoe.
Yeah.
So you can't use it with flash.
Unusual.
You can't use it with like an external viewfinder thing because it doesn't have an EVF. Screen only. Yeah. I think the lack of the EVF is maybe the biggest downside on this to me.
I don't know if I agree because I'm just thinking about some of those existing tiny rangefinder cameras. Now I haven't used an X100, but on the GX7 and the GX85, the EVF was so small and so low resolution that I felt like it wasn't usable a lot of the time.
Okay, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that statement.
And so it kind of depends. I mean, if they really wanted to hit this size class, maybe they just felt like the only way we can fit an EVF is if it's this tiny little thing, and maybe they just felt like that wasn't worth it. I don't know.
Sure, that might be it.
I would miss it. I agree with that. But I think I can understand where that trade-off came from.
All right. What do you think about the resolution of the screen on your XT30? The back screen.
Yeah, I've complained about that on this podcast before. I don't think it's very good. and I feel like it makes your pictures not look very good, which kind of, it's kind of a negative feedback loop when you're taking photos. So I noticed that that's bad, and it bums me out. I haven't looked. What's the deal with this one?
So this one I think is slightly bigger. That one's like a 3-inch. This one may be a little bigger, but the XT30 is a 1.64 million dot. This is a 1.84 million dot.
So it's a little more, but not much.
It's the same back screen as like the S5 II, and so if you've seen the back of that one, like it's fine.
Yeah,
but it's not
all right.
It's not like super great. It's not like a 3 million dot, back screen, kind of like on your. I thought that the XH2S was 3 million dots. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. But like, it's not a super high resolution back screen. They really cut the cost, or kind of like kept that as like a basic economy feature. But that's your only way to see what you're taking pictures of.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer.
And so I kind of wish maybe they maybe pushed that a little bit. Maybe it was a little better of a screen size. You don't have the EVF to fall back on.
A good point. Yeah.
So,
kind of a bummer.
Right. So,
and it makes me wonder how bright that screen gets too, because that's probably the biggest reason to use an EVF is, I'm in bright sunlight and I want to take this picture. I can't see the screen.
Don't they make eyepieces that like cover up the screen that you can suction cup on there and then use it like that?
Oh my gosh, maybe.
Make your own EVF.
I don't know about that.
Cool. Okay, so USB port C, USB-C, which can, I don't remember if it can record out, but it doesn't do like headphone ability because there's no headphone jack on this thing. So like you can't do headphones over the USB-C, but you can power it, do data transfer. We talked about the micro HDMI. It has a microphone in. Great. To mention the cold shoe. When you're holding it, there's no front or rear thumb wheel.
So isn't there a wheel on top?
No, there's one. Wait, is there a wheel on top? There's one wheel that I'm aware of that's behind on the dial. Like if you have a directional dial, you can turn it around in circles. I feel
like there's one on top of it.
I don't believe you.
Like it's not where the I don't think the shutter release is, some cameras put a wheel around the shutter release, and I don't think it's that, but I really thought there was one on the top.
Okay, you look that up, I'm going to keep talking about
right now
the button interface. So like when you're holding this thing, which has no front grip, it is a flat rectangle on the front, which cool. Also cool, they have a grip that you can buy for it, basically, where you like screw it into the tripod plate, and boom, there you go, you got a grip. So it's super, super small and accessorizable for a grip if you need a grip. But if you want it to be as small as possible, no grip.
Yeah, I think that grip's made by a small rig, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Okay, yeah. So you're showing me is it does have a turn wheel and on top around the shutter button.
Yeah, it is around the shutter button. I saw that other button and thought that was the shutter, but it has like a separate video record.
Yeah, it has a separate video record button.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what the deal with this thing for video is, just a giant question mark to me. Because it seems like it has to be a video camera because it says Lumix on it, but it's like super not a video camera. But it's also super a video camera. It's just weird in that way. We'll get into that in a little bit.
All right.
Okay, so you got one wheel, just one. I wish there was like 3.
Yeah.
There's one wheel, and then you have a mode dial for your manual or aperture or whatever, and then that has 3 custom modes on it, so you can set your 3 custom modes. And then on the back you have like a queue, a quick menu, and then pictures, back, and display or whatever.
Yeah, there's no joystick.
Yeah, and then you have I guess you have 2 wheels because I believe that back directional dial will be a wheel. So
yeah, you use it to like roll through menus or whatever.
Okay, 2 wheels, very basic, like just super basic on the button features. No headphone jack, it's like super basic. No hot shoe, etc., etc., etc. No viewfinder. But it's also like $1,500 full frame camera. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna spend $1,500 on a full frame camera, it's either this or an R8. Yeah, maybe you buy an R8. I don't know, or maybe you need this to be super tiny and you buy this one.
I mean, that's what I was gonna say. I don't feel like the price is the interesting part about it. I think the size is.
I agree. The size is definitely the interesting part, and you can tell like all of the compromises around it are related to the size, like the minimal inputs. The fact that the SD card, the single SD card slot, is next to the battery in the battery door.
Yeah, you don't see that very much.
Yeah, it's like my least favorite place to put an SD card.
Yeah, same here.
But whatever. It's tiny, right? Which I feel like maybe we should talk about the lenses a little bit, and then we can talk a little more about the features. Which some of the features around this thing are pretty cool. Yeah.
Did we mention that it uses the sensor from the S5 Mark II?
No, we did not. So we should mention that.
I think that's a pretty important part. Like, at this price point, at that size, it's not just a full frame sensor. Like it's the same sensor from the S5 Mark II that, people really like that camera for video and photo, and, they fit that same sensor in.
I love the images that we've seen come out of the S5 Mark II.
Yeah.
And the video is super good, even in the way too punchy standard profiles that I have. Every single time I color grade standard profile Lumix video, I take the contrast and I drag it down to 0.8.
Yep.
It's ridiculous to me when I pull up a waveform and the waveform is like past the limits. It's past 0 and past 1080 on the waveform, and so I have to drag the contrast back until it comes inside those limits. Which, to the credit of Lumix and their codecs, I don't lose it.
Yeah.
Like most cameras, especially if you shoot an 8-bit and you're looking at your waveform, if it's at the top of the waveform, it's cut off. And on Lumix, you can typically have maybe a third stop or more above that on the waveform because you're shooting in 10-bit and it's a better codec. And you can just pull that puppy down, get it into the waveform, and then it's not going to blow out your shadows and your highlights on really bad monitors.
You can do that. Sometimes when I'm going through footage, we're in this situation a lot where you and I film at events and we're shooting Fuji, F-Log2, and then we've got some people shooting on S5 Mark IIs and they're using just the standard profile. Yeah. Every time I have this experience where I'll be going through footage after the event, and a lot of times I'm looking at that Fuji footage without a lot on it, just seeing, was the framing good? Is it in focus? That kind of thing. And so the Fuji files are these super flat, log profile. And then I pull up one of those Lumix clips and it looks to me like something's wrong. Like it is so contrasty. Like what happened to this footage? Did they double apply a LUT? No, that's just the way the footage looks.
Yeah. It looks good. It looks super punchy. But for my, it's hard though whenever you look at something that's punchy and then you get used to it. Then you look at something that should look normal and you're like, why does it look flat and dumb?
It's funny. I actually really like punchy stuff. Like a lot of times when I edit photos, I end up boosting the saturation just a little bit because I really like the way that looks. So maybe I'm just meant to be a Panasonic guy. I don't know.
So that's what I do though. When I'm trying to match the two, what I did this time is I took the F-Log2 footage and I just did the F-Log2 to WDR conversion. And then I took the Lumix footage and I took the contrast down by 20% because that fixes the saturation problem also. Because it's typically really oversaturated in my opinion. My opinion, it looks good. It's just, anyways. And then I take the Fuji stuff and I take the color boost for saturation and I crank that up until I look at the vector scope and the colors push past the edges of the vector scope so that it's massively oversaturated, and then the footage looks the same.
So that's the sensor on this camera.
Yeah, anyways, so that's the sensor, which, because it's the same sensor and because it's Panasonic, they're here's all the same record modes. 6K open gate, 4K 60, all the stuff, right? You can do just all the things.
Well, and what's funny to me is that this little pocketable camera has a vector scope and waveform on it.
Yeah, boy.
And meanwhile, my video centric XH2S doesn't. Come on, guys.
It's very it's just classic Panasonic. They're well, we're just gonna shove it all in here.
Yeah.
But that comes at the cost of heat, right?
You can no
shoot,
fan on this camera.
You can shoot 6K for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
Real short record limits. 4K is 15 minutes.
Yep.
So you can't really do anything kind of long form stuff, but that's because it's not a video camera.
Yeah.
It's maybe a vlog camera. You got the flippy screen on it. You got a microphone. You're not really probably going to be monitoring your audio when you're vlogging. So super small, compact. Maybe you're going to shoot for 15 minutes at a time. That seems perfect.
Sure.
If you're just in hand turning this thing around, it's got in-body image stabilization, even though it's super tiny. That would look great, right? Full frame, handheld, vlogging. This seems perfect.
I agree.
I think it's this or the ZV-1 would be the two competing things. And the ZV-1 is just going to be better for low light probably.
Yeah.
But this one go to 6K. It's higher resolution sensor. It's 12 megapixels versus 26. This one's going to be a better photo camera than the ZV-1. But I do think that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
It's just that the ZV-1 is $1,000 more. It doesn't have the auto reframing feature.
Yeah, I don't know.
How big is that one?
I don't know if those cameras are really all that comparable because of that. I mean, the price is so different between them.
ZV-E1, sorry.
Yeah. I think
but if you're shopping
I don't think it's as small.
It's $2,200. So
it's
$700 different. But if you're shopping for super compact, full frame, interchangeable lens cameras that are good for vlogging also, I don't know what else you would compare in this category. It is
I guess that's true.
121 millimeters by 72 by 54. So the ZVE1 is slightly shorter by 5 millimeters as far as width, and then height 2 millimeters shorter. But then it's wide, thicker. It's thicker because it has a grip.
Which is probably one of the more, for pocketability, that's a pretty important metric.
Sure. Well, I mean, if you're gonna have a lens on it, it kind of doesn't matter. It's just because it's measuring the grip. If you ignored the grip, then these things are basically the same size.
Yeah.
Lumix is maybe slightly smaller and exactly the same weight, 3 grams off. So I don't know. That feels like a pretty apt comparison.
I guess you're right. Yeah. I think the price then is the biggest difference.
And the record limits.
Yeah.
And the microphone and the headphone jack. I still kind of want a ZVE one. That'd be so cool. Anyways, so I don't remember where we're going to go for this thing. We're going to talk about the features, or we're going to talk about the lenses.
Either way, we need to cover both.
Okay, all right. So Daniel, when they announced this thing, they announced like a zoom that was coming up that I can't remember. We're not going to talk about, but they announced a new prime lens, and all the press photos show this prime lens on this camera.
Yeah, it's a pancake, right?
Because it's like a tiny little pancake, and they're like, well, we need to look like here's a small little pancake lens and this tiny camera. We need something for the marketing photos. What can you whip up that's only going to cost $5 to produce, but we can charge $200 for people to buy? And so they came out with this plastic 26 millimeter f8.
F8.
That's not f8 to f16. It's just f8.
Yeah, it's like a fixed aperture,
fixed lens, manual focus. It has contacts.
Well, you don't need autofocus when you have f8.
It has
everything's in focus.
It has electric contacts on it, so that whenever you put it on the camera, it can tell you what lens is on there.
Sure.
But that's it. This is like the most basic. You could you could take the lens off, turn on that feature where it's like shoot without a lens on, and put saran wrap over the front of the sensor. Same image.
I don't understand the lens. I saw some people talking about it and saying, in positive terms, that they felt like you could really just kind of casually shoot with it because it being f8, it's like anything's gonna be in focus.
Yeah, if you wanted to treat this camera like a full frame disposable camera, not full frame. A film disposable camera is going to be the same size, right? 35 millimeter. It's like shooting with that.
Yeah, but who's buying a $1,500 camera and wanting to compromise it with that? I don't understand.
If it's just your casual carry around camera, maybe that's fine. I don't know.
I don't think anybody should buy that lens except as a novelty.
Right. So whenever Nikon released their camera, they released this like 40 millimeter f2 tiny lens, and obviously maybe a little longer, a more serious lens than this like super small pancake, but that seems like a way better deal. A 40 millimeter lens would be perfect on this if you're looking for a little carry around point and shoot style camera. Give me like a little tiny 40 millimeter.
Yeah, especially full frame. 26 millimeter full frame is pretty wide. I don't know. It could work for vlogging maybe, but I think, I'd rather have the 40.
Yeah, so this lens is just ridiculous. If someone gave it to me, I would say, thanks. I'll probably use that here or there. I would never put down $200 for that lens.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just, maybe it's perfect for somebody. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Anyways, you got that phase detect autofocus. Come on.
Yeah.
The manual focus lens? Anyways.
And the autofocus is apparently pretty good. So, it's like use autofocus.
It's probably manual focus because you don't have to focus it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is.
You just set it to whatever middle, and as long as you're not shooting something closer than 4 feet, everything's in focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that's why it's manual focus.
Anyway, I have a list here of all the lenses that I think are viable options for this camera, because whenever I excluded that 26 millimeter lens it came with, I was like, this camera is super tiny. Are there any tiny L-mount lenses?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any pancake L-mount lenses.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's one that I'm missing, but I'm not aware of any that exist.
Because that's definitely really what matters for having something be portable or not.
Exactly.
When you're talking about an interchangeable lens camera.
Which is when I saw this and how small it was, my first reaction was, why isn't this micro four thirds?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many good, super tiny lenses that would make this a wonderful, compact system.
Yeah.
You're trying to cram full frame down into that size. well, where's the full frame lenses that make sense? And most of the ones that are going to make sense are going to be quote unquote slow. They're going to be like 3.5,
Yeah.
f3.5. But
Which
like,
is that's probably fine.
if you're shooting on, say you were shooting on Micro Four Thirds, that's like f1.7.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And
which a lot of Micro Four Thirds lenses are f1.7.
Yeah.
That's very common.
Yeah. So like 3.5, I think is good enough if you're looking for portable f4 to 5 f5.6.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm okay with that if it's like really tiny to fit this type of application.
Yeah.
And then that sensor that's in this camera, it's decent on noise. Like some of the stuff that I've seen that's like 6400, like you can see the noise, but it's good. It's good. It's like dual gain and that sort of thing. So like perfectly fine for shooting in lower speed. Anyways, moving on. You got 2 zooms for you. You got the 20 to 60, 3.5 to 5.6.
I think I've heard that's a kit lens for some of their cameras.
Right. And it's 3.4 inches long. So my criteria here, I wanted lenses that were less than the weight of the camera itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted, which is 486 grams. And I wanted lenses that are less than 4 inches long.
Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, I shoot on Fuji and I know that like my sub 3.5 inch lenses are like the ones that feel nice and compact and look to scale correctly on the camera. It's not like you stuck a 150 to 600 on this thing. You wouldn't even see the camera anymore.
Yeah, it would balance really poorly too.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking like get it under 4 inches or less.
Sure.
And anyways, so 3.4 inches with a 67 millimeter filter thread. You got a 20 to 60, which seems like a nice, decent range for just a carry-around camera, carry-around lens.
Yeah,
okay,
I think that's
so that's
reasonable.
option 1. Next option, you need something a little wider. I mean, you're shooting full frame. Let's get some wide stuff.
Yeah, or maybe you want to do vlogging.
Maybe you want to do vlogging. Got a 14 to 28 f4 to f5.6, which is also a macro. This is a Panasonic lens, and it's 3.4 inches, so same length, 250 grams.
That's pretty reasonable too.
Real light, little plastic, probably with that weight. But you get macro and you get the width. I think that's a nice pairing too.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you need those are the only zooms that I felt fit for this thing. I'd be like, there's some fantastic L mount glass. Like you can go out there and get a 24 to 70. You can get this new what is that Sigma? It's like a
28 to 45.
Yeah, 28 to 45, 1.8. You get that. Man, that thing weighs 2 pounds.
Yeah,
it'd be 4 times. Man,
oh my gosh,
that would be ridiculous.
Yeah, twice the weight of the camera. It that's the problem with full frame. I mean, I used to own a Canon EOS R, and I was just blown away at how bulky and heavy a full frame 24 to 70 can be.
Yes, sir. Juge. Okay, so I got some primes for you because that was all the I'm not even gonna get into these like standards. Like
Sure.
there's zooms for L mount.
Yeah, probably not what
seemed to.
So, that. But the thing about this camera is because it's an L mount camera, and Panasonic makes other L mount cameras that are very popular. If you already have L mount lenses, maybe you buy this camera as a second, photo only camera or something.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, maybe if you have a 24 to 70, it makes sense to put that on there. But that's probably not what you should buy if you're buying this camera and like building out a kit based around this camera.
Right. Definitely. And which kind of comes to this, like the bit of the conclusion a little bit of like, who's this for? Like,
sure.
Anyways,
before we get there,
here's the primes. I'm not going to talk about that. 28. Lumix has a bunch of primes they came out with that are all like roughly the same size. Those are okay. I think they're a little big for this, but they are fairly light. So while like the 24, 35, 50, 1.8 Lumix primes, probably decent fits. They probably work with the new zoom feature, which, Daniel, did you see this thing?
Yeah. It kind of like combines optical and digital zoom.
Yeah. Like on a lot of cameras, you can like hit the button and say, do the crop mode thing.
Mm-hmm.
On this one, you can get it to just do it through the zoom range. And so if you took this 20 to 60, it can go up to a 2x zoom. And so and you don't have to do anything. You just like turn on the feature and all you do is zoom the lens and it will apply a digital crop. So like whenever you're zoomed into 2x at 60, which would be 120 millimeters, it's going to be like 12 megapixels instead of 26. Mm-hmm. But if you turn this feature on because you just need the zoom, that 20 to 60 is now a 20 to 120.
It's a pretty cool way to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Or that this 14 would be a 14 to 56.
Yeah.
Booyah.
It's neat that they make that sort of transparent to you.
Yeah. I like it. I mean, I would use it with these primes. I would do like a 24 and a 48.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. So Sigma has some compact contemporary primes, and these are all nice and small. So they have a 24 millimeter 3.5, which is like 225 grams, and it's less than 2 inches long. It's like 1.9 inches, real small.
Man, I would pick that over that 26 f8 for sure.
I mean, or there's a 24 millimeter f2, which is 2.8 inches long, so a little longer, but you get f2.
Yeah, that's not bad.
0.8 f2, no, straight up to f2. Okay, and there's a few more Sigmas. There's a 17, a 45, and a 50. And so like the 17 and the 45, the 17's f4, the 45's f2.8, but they're both about like 60 to 63 millimeter filter threads, and they're both 1.9 inches long.
Mm-hmm.
So like you got these 3 or 4 primes that are all sub 2 inches. They're not like super, super fast, but they're not slow. I mean, you're between f2 and f3.5 on full frame, which is pretty good. Those all seem great.
Yeah.
I would pick up like the 45 and the 24, and then maybe like the 20 to 60 if I had this camera, and that might be my kit.
Yeah. I think those are reasonable choices. I mean, small enough that you can still feel like it's a compact little setup, but those all seem like capable lenses.
Yeah, definitely. Nice, small, nice, compact. I mean, we mentioned that the camera was how wide is it? This thing's like 54 millimeters wide. Oh boy, how many inches is that? That's like 2 inches, right?
About 2,
roughly 2. So it just doubles the width of the camera.
Yeah, which feels proportional.
That feels proportional. So go grab you like a 17 or a 24 millimeter Sigma contemporary prime. Yeah. Perfect.
I think it makes sense.
They should have just like went over and talked to Sigma and said, "Hey, can we borrow that 45 millimeter prime to slap on this thing for all our marketing photos because it would look great."
Would have been better than the Pancake, but
or you could go out there and buy some like $5,000 Summilux lenses because those are all L mount too.
There you go.
I mean, that would be cool. I didn't write any of those down because all of those are very heavy, like because they're like all metal construction and stuff. So those Summiluxes are like 800 or 900 grams.
The priority of those is not portability.
Correct. Yeah. But if it's image quality, super nice. All right. So I was happy to see that. I mean, your L mount manufacturer of choice, Sigma, out there, they got you covered. They have all the lenses. Here's a few compact full frame primes that'll get you through for this massively tiny camera.
Yeah, it's kind of, we've talked before about how, at first L mount really seemed kind of like, it sounds like a good mount, but why are there only like 4 lenses for it? And now it's like the tables have totally turned, where it feels like any lens you want, you can find that in L mount, and that's really good news for companies like Panasonic.
Yeah, it's getting there. There still isn't something like the 2 to 2.8, 35 to 150, which is the second time I've mentioned that lens in this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Or there isn't like a 28 to 70 equivalent, like Canon has that 28 to 70 f2. We haven't seen that come out for L mount.
Yeah, but I mean, you start getting kind of picky with that. I mean, there's a lot of good lenses on L mount.
Yeah, there's a lot more 1.4 primes on L mount than anyone else too.
Mm-hmm.
I like L mount.
Yeah. Anyway, you want to talk some about the features on the
S9? Okay, so we talked about the grip, talked about the SD card being stupid, we talked about hybrid zoom. It's all electronic shutter. There's no mechanical shutter in this.
I think that's one of the biggest possible gotchas of the camera.
I think that is the reason I wouldn't buy this camera.
Yeah.
I would consider it. Like I like the idea of like a small compact photo camera to just have with me all the time, which is why I'm probably gonna buy your X-T5. Neither here nor there. I like a small camera with a small lens that takes really good pictures, and like this would basically be that. It's smaller than almost every Fuji camera. It might even be smaller than the XT50.
Yeah, and it's full frame, so I mean, it's got that going for it.
Yeah, that was the other thing. Is like I was like, man, if I had a point and shoot camera, I would want it to be different enough for my Fujis. Which is why, I'm like, man, I don't think I'd ever buy an X106 because I can buy an XT5 and I already have all the lenses.
Yeah.
If I could buy like a Sony or something that like an RX1R that here's a higher resolution than my XH2S and full frame, now it's different enough that it makes sense.
Sure. Which like this sort of seems like it could be, but this electronic shutter thing's kind of a bummer.
I wrote down the dimensions of the XT50 in inches because I'm ridiculous, and so I can't tell you if it's smaller, but I think it's bigger. It is 438 grams.
You have your on our notes. You do have the numbers for this camera for the S9 also in inches.
Oh, I do?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, scroll.
Everybody's on the edge of their seats right now wondering how this is going to match up.
Okay, the S9 is 4.87 versus 4.96, so slightly longer.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2.9 and 1.8. So let me scroll back down here. This is a really good radio. It is shorter because the XT50 has the viewfinder on top, has that little house on top.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're basically the same width.
Yeah.
So pretty much the same size. The XT50 is slightly lighter.
Yeah. But, the battery is another factor there because the XT50 uses a stupid old battery.
Those batteries suck.
And the battery in the S9 is the same battery they used in the S5 Mark II. So, it's a little bit bigger. It's kind of impressive they fit that battery into the S9.
Okay, yeah. So I know this is going to be a huge surprise to you, Daniel. Mostly because I'm on Team Tilt Screen, and this has an EVF. I'd pick the XT50 over it. It's the same price, 40 megapixels instead of 26. So
Fuji
better for the photos, but and get the film simulations. I don't know. The lens choices. I'd pick the Fuji.
Yeah. Well, we need to get into that on this camera.
Okay, fine.
It's kind of got the film simulation.
Let's talk.
We need to talk about the electronic shutter a little bit more, though.
Okay.
Why would that stop you from getting this camera?
It's not fast enough. Like the rolling shutter on this isn't terrible, but let's just recap it. Even though everyone who listens to the show totally knows because they're all gearheads, probably. Who knows? I know they're all gearheads, Daniel. They all email me individually and say, "Lucas, love the gear, love the pod." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, buds."
I don't know why they sound like they're from Jersey, but okay.
Anyway, so when you shoot with a mechanical shutter, it turns the sensor on, and then it drops one shutter, and then it drops the other shutter right behind it, back curtain, front curtain, or vice versa, whatever. And then as it's doing this thing, the whole sensor's on, it captures all the light, and then it reads the info off the sensor sequentially, one line at a time. You don't get rolling shutter.
Right.
If there's something that's moving through the frame, like a train or a car, or you're panning while you shoot and you have vertical lines in it, you're not going to get things that offset, right?
Yeah.
Your blades of your helicopters aren't going to look like wobbly or whatever.
Yeah, the only time you normally deal with rolling shutter on mirrorless cameras is in video, because then you're leaving the sensor, you're leaving the shutter open and you're reading off the sensor.
So when you shoot electronic shutter, it's just there's no shutter, there's no mechanical shutter in front of it. You turn you just say, okay, there's an image in front of you. Instead of turning on the sensor and dropping a shutter, we're just going to read right now every line.
Yeah.
Really fast, top to bottom. And because of that, if something moves, even if something jumps up and down, while from the time when you start reading at the top to the time you start reading at the bottom, you're going to have a misaligned image.
Yep.
And for me, it's kind of a problem, right? If you have a fast enough sensor, it's not a problem. The Z9, the Z8, the A1, they shoot so fast. Yeah. They shoot an electronic shutter, and it's great. For this, there's so many sample images from whenever they launched this thing, where you in photo you can see the rolling shutter be a problem.
I agree. It would be a problem for me too. If you want to get a panning shot of a moving car, it's going to look bad on that camera.
Yeah, you just can't do it. And I know it's probably because of space restraints. I wish that it had one shutter in it. You can do electronic first curtain shutter where it turns on the sensor and then you drop the one instead of having the two. I think that would have been maybe a decent compromise.
Yeah, because the other problem that we haven't really mentioned is the flickering lights. So something that we've dealt with a lot when we shoot video is especially if you have LED lights, if they're dimmed down or something, at certain shutter speeds, you can get weird banding across the image, and that's going to happen on this camera in photo because of the electronic shutter.
Yeah, I can deal with it in video fine, and this thing is weird, slightly compromised in all its videos. So it has great video specs, their chord modes and the slower reading shutter and blah blah. I would be able to deal with all that. That's fine. I just wish for photo you didn't have to.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's kind of a big detractor for me.
It makes this not feel like an enthusiast photo camera.
Yeah, exactly. I do feel that way. I think that I'm going to complain about it, but maybe for a lot of people, it's not so much an issue. Rolling shutter can be kind of edge casey if you are taking pictures.
I felt that way in video. I don't feel that way about photos.
If you're taking pictures of your friends, if you're taking pictures on vacation of static subjects, you're taking landscapes, it's probably going to be fine. But once you introduce fast movement, Like, you're not going to shoot sports with this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say someone was like, I just want like a tiny little camera and I'm going to go out and take sports pictures of my kids. Not this.
Yeah.
Because
not
of
the
the
right
electronic
choice.
shutter.
Yeah.
Like, there are fast enough shutters that are solely electronic that are good enough.
Sure.
Those cameras are super expensive, but I don't know. Like, I would shoot an electronic shutter on like an Olympus OM1D Mark II because that one's stacked.
Yeah. Or a Z9.
Or a Z8. That Z8's so good, Daniel.
Yep.
Anyways.
I think the biggest feature we need to talk about though is that LUT thing.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the LUT. Let me finish reading through here. I mentioned no headphone jack, flippy screen, all the modes. Okay, it has a button on it, and that button says LUT.
Yep, sure does.
And you press the button, and you can apply a LUT to whatever you're shooting.
Yep.
And apparently, it's like a little confusing.
Yeah, it sounded pretty confusing.
And I think that you can choose to like bake in the look or not, but you have to like figure out what you're doing.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression I got. I mean, basically, it's just sort of like Fujifilm simulations, right?
Yes. I have like so many things to say about this, but just to kind of cover it a little bit. So you can apply LUTs to photo or video to have them bake in into like the final image. And you can download other people's LUTs using the Lumix Lab app.
And you can also use that app to make your own.
And you can use that app to make your own. Super cool. Not clear to me. Can you do your, edit a photo or have like a look, a preset or whatever in Lightroom or Photoshop, export that as a cube file and bring it into this app?
I think they're the same LUTs. So
there's dot cubes, right?
Yeah,
they're just
so
the same.
I think you probably can, but I guess I don't know for sure.
Because that would be cool. Like if you have some presets in Lightroom that you just absolutely love and you know you're going to apply them every time, maybe you bought a bunch of presets, it feels like you could probably export that cube file somehow and then bring it into the camera.
I would bet so.
Sick. That's super, super cool. Okay, so that's the feature. Make your own, download some. It's got a button for it.
Yeah.
It's basically your own like simulations or whatever.
You can bake it in, or you can, like on photos, for example, you can shoot in RAW, and then in the camera, if you want, you can process that RAW using the LUT to, you can do all that in the camera if you want.
Cool.
So yeah, it's pretty flexible, but I think maybe also a little confusing.
I think for me, the most confusing thing about this whole like LUT thing is that it is like they are LUTs, like it's straight up LUTs, but that means different things to different people. And if you're not used to like using LUTs, I feel like you could easily go astray. Like we're used to using LUTs a lot in video because we're shooting in like log or whatever. And it's essentially like a shortcut to doing a color space transform. But a LUT is taking, okay, here's the input. I'm going to go to this table and I'm going to transform those inputs into a different gamma or whatever. It's going to like change. It can change your gamma. It can change your color space. You can do all kinds of cool things, apply a look, but it's just super, super dependent upon what's coming in. And so like you can't just take any input and shove it through a LUT and have the expected output. You have to have the expected input to get the expected output.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have this LUT that I really, really love. I slap it on my S-Log3 footage and it looks great. I'm just going to go put this on my thing. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's where the Lab app comes in though, because I mean, I think one of the confusing parts is that the way they work on the S9 is that each LUT is based on one of the picture profiles in the camera.
Correct.
And that could be like the standard profile. It could also be Vlog.
Correct.
But every LUT is kind of like when you load it on the camera, it's basically tied to that profile. And so I assume the way that would work is in the app. I would assume somehow you can see like a sample or something of, here's what your input is going to be for this LUT. I think it's important and good that they tied it to those modes, just because, like you said, it does matter what your input is if you want to get. It
does seem like though that you could create a LUT based on the standard profile and then slap it on the vivid profile, and it would maybe do something that's super cool or not what you're expecting at all.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I guess what I'm saying is you're gonna make that decision before you're selecting options on the camera. Because I think at the time you're selecting options on the camera, I think the LUT has been, linked to a profile in the camera.
Yeah, so having not like held this in my hand and gone through those systems, I think that like maybe we're gonna end up going in circles a bit.
Yeah.
It just it seemed like to me that maybe there was a situation where you could, pick a LUT and then it not be on the right profile. But hopefully, like ideally, you hit the LUT button and it's like you just pick your thing and it resets the picture profile.
That's what it does. Yeah.
For you.
That's what it does. And because it can be annoying. Because like if you pick one that's tied to Vlog, then all of a sudden you have a minimum ISO, which maybe surprises you, if you're not expecting it. And so I think it does do that, but I don't know if you can like force your way around that system.
So. One thing that feels like weird and full circle to me is the concept of shooting in Vlog and applying a LUT and then the final output being a baked in LUT on Vlog.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
I get it if you're trying to like get a certain look to the footage or whatever, but like how is that different than just like shooting in standard? Say you have like a standard correction profile and so you're shooting with a baked in standard conversion LUT on Vlog. How is that different than just shooting in standard?
Yeah.
Like, it's just the camera's doing double. I don't get it. Like,
yeah, I don't think that makes sense in that case. I think it only makes like if you're shooting in Vlog, I think it would make sense if you had a LUT that was a combination of a standard transform and then plus whatever LUT you wanted to apply for a look. I assume you could make one LUT that does both of those things.
Sure.
So maybe it's like you don't have to grade your footage. And I mean, I think that's kind of where they're, at least on the video side, that's kind of like why they're doing this feature, right? Is that you can, shoot your video and upload it to TikTok. And it's, you shot in logs, you got all the dynamic range, but you've already got your look applied and you don't have to do all the stuff.
But like, if the camera can do that in camera, then why doesn't it just do that in camera all the time? How come in the back, like, why in the background is it not just shooting in log and then applying a conversion if it's going to get you more dynamic range?
Yeah, good question. I don't know.
I'm like, I think that's just what it does.
Yeah.
It's taking raw data and like doing a thing with it, but now it's taking raw data, doing a thing with it, and then doing another thing with it to get. I just find it totally ridiculous. I'm like, if I'm going to shoot in Vlog, give me the Vlog. But like to the other point though, it's like, if you need to know what it looks like, now you can apply those custom LUTs to like see it, but then you still have the Vlog afterwards.
Yeah.
I just think there's no reason or no way it makes sense to shoot in Vlog with a baked in LUT.
Yeah, well, I could see that. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I think the feature's cool overall. I mean, because the Fujifilm simulation thing is obviously great. I mean, that's, I think, something that has drawn both of us to Fuji cameras, but it's neat that this is a more immediately flexible version of that. I know that people do, Fuji recipes, where they go and tweak one of the existing ones, but this just seems simpler than that. If you want to try out custom things or, use somebody else's file.
Yeah,
or
both simpler and more complicated.
Yeah.
To put a cap on the last thing that I just said, for photo, I think it makes sense. If you have like a really cool LUT that you just love, but it's for Vlog and you want to use it for photo, you can shoot in photo and Vlog and convert it. I'll be okay with that. Just don't do it in video or else I'll come find you. But yes, I think if there was some sort of like community that built up because of this camera of like, hey, you can look at all these cool LUTs that I built that I shared with you that, now here's a Kodak like Porta 400 LUT. And if you just use the standard profile and like, here you go, that would be super cool. Cause then you can pick your film simulations or pick your looks and have all these cool ones that you really, really love and like get it just super dialed in. And that's 100% my speed. I love that. I feel like where Fuji is on this is, you look at the XT50, they have a film simulation dial on there and you can't save your custom versions of those on that dial. They want you to use the standard ones.
Yeah,
they
want to use the Fuji.
Yeah, here's the 17 simulations. Just use them out of the box. They're going to look super great. And then there you go. We spent all this time on them with our color scientists and labs and blah, blah, blah. Whereas Lumix is kind of like, we don't even know what to do with this. Here you go. Yeah. They didn't ship any LUTs with this thing.
They have names like Sample 1, Sample 2.
Yeah.
Like that was a weird, I didn't understand that.
That feels like a total miss.
It does.
Because like Kodak would license their names. Like Kodak's just waiting. They're like, come on, somebody give us money to use the name Kodak. We'll do it. We don't care what it is. It's a toaster. Boom. There you go. Kodak toaster. I feel like Panasonic could have said, just like, here's like $20. And then it doesn't even have to look like not a Turna, Eastman. But like, they'd be like, here's an Eastman LUT. Boom. They could have called it Clint. That's not the same thing. Anyways, they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, come on. You're going to like roll out this super sick feature. Give like 3 samples. But that aren't called sample 1, sample 2, sample 3.
They're really putting a lot of trust that the community's going to, kind of come around this camera, and, the people will put LUTs in that Lumix Lab app, and they're really hoping that's going to happen because, it's kind of strange that they didn't release any.
Okay, so is this... Boy, I'm going to like throw something way, way back. It's going to... Anyways, beef or bust, Daniel?
I don't even know what you're saying.
Is this feature good or bad? Is this a win, or is this like a miss?
So I'll say first, I was really interested to see this on this camera because it kind of makes me wonder if this is going to come to more of their cameras.
It's on the GH7.
And it is? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so the answer is yes.
If you go to Panasonic's website and you say, what are the landmark features of the GH7? Here's 10 bullet points. Number 6 is this.
Interesting. Yeah. So, probably, S1H Mark II, et cetera, other Lumix cameras are going to have this. So I think it's interesting to look at from that perspective.
Or they use the Fuji strategy and only cameras going forward get it.
Well, I mean, obviously.
Now everyone's going to have to buy an S5 Mark III.
Obviously. I think it's a cool feature. The reason I think it's cool is because you don't have to use it. So if you had to use this, then, maybe that would annoy me. But it's just kind of this extra option you have. If you want to bake in a LUT for your photos, you can. Or if you want to preview, vlog, like, it's neat that you can do that. You can do that on other cameras too. I don't know. I think it's a little confusing right now. They could probably simplify the experience a bit, but I think it's a cool feature.
All right.
I would be pumped about it if I had the S9.
So beef, not bust.
Yep.
Got it.
What about you? What do you think?
I'm into this. This is my speed. I love it. I would love this feature on any camera that I owned. I think that maybe the implementation is less user friendly on the face of it.
Mm-hmm.
But having not used it, I can't say that definitively.
In some ways, because
here's I love Android phones because I can customize them to death.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take someone into a room and you say, "Here's 1,000 knobs and switches," some people just like don't want to have to deal with the knobs and switches. And I think like that's where I land on this, is that for some people it's maybe like they're never going to use that button because because sample 1, sample 2, sample 3 is intimidating. But for people who want knobs and buttons, this is like 10 thumbs up.
You're probably right. I mean, it was a huge miss to not include some presets. But I guess it's, because you can do this on cameras now. You can make a picture profile looks like you want. But the way you're doing that is going into the profile and adjust, you get all those weird settings, where you can adjust the color balance and stuff. And who's doing that? I mean, having this thing where there's an app on your phone where you can probably preview what it looks like and, tweak it on there, sounds like it's going to be way more usable in that regard. I think, maybe in terms of on the camera, how are you selecting those things? What is that doing? Maybe that's still a little confusing, but I think if you are willing to customize it, this is probably easier than what you've been able to do on other cameras.
Oh yeah, you're not going to go in and just like the black gamma or the knee.
Yeah,
that's not confusing at all.
Yeah,
Sony. Okay, we already talked about the lenses. I did have this question here bolded of why wasn't this Micro Four Thirds?
Yeah, I think that's you kind of mentioned that earlier especially with like the lens choices. So what do you think the answer is?
So whenever they came out with the G9 Mark II. It's almost the exact same body as the S5 Mark II. They're just like, here's the Micro Four Thirds version of this camera. It's like, why is it not smaller? It's a freaking Micro Four Thirds camera. Why are you using the same body as the S5 Mark II? And they're like, money. What if there will be a Micro Four Thirds version of this?
Now that you mention it, that seems certainly plausible.
I mean, like
it's not the first time they've done that.
Leica came out with a new Deluxe camera, and there was always the Panasonic version of that. The Deluxe camera is not this camera, so like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe there's going to be a GX10.
Could be.
Maybe. Who knows?
I mean, it's a good size. Like we said, it's about the same size as the GX9, so it would make sense
if they took like the G9 II or the GH7 sensor and slapped it in this thing. Maybe that gives them room to put EVF on it. I doubt it. I think that would be cool.
Even if not, it would probably be a good camera. I mean, it would certainly be cheaper than this.
It would open up the possibilities for that 20 millimeter 1.7 pancake.
Yeah.
Love that lens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that 45, what was it, 1.8?
Yeah.
That lens is awesome.
Yep.
Like super, super good. There's so many tiny, small lenses that would fit perfectly on this thing. And the G9 is awesome. It could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And like you could probably get longer record modes because it would probably put off slightly less heat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Slightly.
I mean, in a lot of ways, that would make more sense than this camera in terms of the, in terms of like cost and lens options. And
I
stuff.
doubt this thing's going to sell enough to justify having two versions of it, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, sure is.
Okay, conclusion is the last bullet point I have here, which is who is this for? Why did they make this thing?
Yeah, I think that's really the big question. The first thing that comes to mind for me is they saw how popular the X100 series was and said, we need to compete with that. And this is their way of doing that.
I mean, it's tiny. It has looks.
It's about the same price.
About the same price. I'm sure.
They're doing no lens. So it's a little more expensive.
Yeah, but it's like if you're already an L mount, here's an X100 6 option for you.
I mean, that's what I come down to on it. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I think if you're already in L mount, this suddenly makes a lot more sense.
So whenever I first got into photography, I bought that GX7 mostly because it was like super, super cheap. It was like $200 or $300 because it was like really old and whatever. Anyways, if price was less of a factor at that time, like if me now was just getting into photography, I would consider this because of how small and easy it seems, and it has kind of the looks. It's got a flippy screen, and like I would say, I probably don't need a headphone jack. I'm not doing like tons and tons of video or whatever. As a first camera, I kind of, even though like, it's expensive for a first camera, but I kind of like it as a easy beginner.
Yeah.
I just want to take pictures of my family camera. I think it's good for that. To me, this is not a workhorse camera. This is not like I bought one camera to do all my things. This isn't like an R6 Mark II
or like this is my second camera for shooting weddings or something. Like it's not really good for that.
Yeah, it's not that. I think that you can get professional level images with it.
Sure.
And so I don't want to say it's not a professional camera. If you're like a pro photographer, you can get professional images with anything.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I don't want to like say this is not a pro camera because you could totally do pro work on this. Just depends upon your work.
I think the electronic shutter is probably the biggest thing that stands in the way of that.
Yeah. So I think it's like, is it a travel camera? I think probably.
Yeah, I think so.
It's the casual camera, sure. I don't think it's a workhorse camera. I don't think it's a primary video camera. I think it is a vlogging camera.
Yeah, vlogging for sure. I think I can see it as a second casual camera if you're in L mount.
It's definitely a camera for your camera if you're in L mount. If you have an S5 Mark II and you're looking for a camera for your camera, this would be a good camera.
Yeah.
It's not a B camera. If you have an S5 Mark II, I wouldn't buy this as a B camera. I'd just buy another S5 Mark II.
The record limits will kill you.
Yeah, for sure.
And because the S5 Mark II is not that much more expensive than this. A couple $100 more new, assuming you're not finding one like used in excellent condition. Like you're not saving money.
Yeah.
So
do you think this is like Lumix dipping their toe back into the point and shoot market? Like it's not. It is not a point and shoot, but like point and shoots just kind of went away. Like the people stopped buying them in mid 2000s because of cell phones, but now it seems like they're like premium point and shoots are still desperately wanted, and people are buying old point and shoots like crazy. The Coolpix Revolution, and I think that these maybe like manufacturers are starting to see, okay, like there is room for a $1,000 plus point and shoot camera for people, and I'm wondering if like this is more of Lumix kind of trying to test those waters to see if there's interest.
I kind of think so. I mean, that's sort of in the same vein as the X100, and I think that makes sense. Again, like with the money aspect of the G9 II having the same body as the S5, they're looking to save money on R&D where they can. In this case, they're using the same sensor that they used on the S5 Mark II, so that's saving them something. Same battery and all that. That it definitely feels like they used some of what they already had, in the shed to make this. It uses L mount. I think it makes sense as a camera. And maybe they will see, what the popularity of it is and use that to decide, what to do next as far as something like a point and shoot.
For sure. So I guess like where I finally land on this, because we're not going to get to the GH7 because we were like way over.
I was hoping we would, but yeah, that's not happening.
It's just not happening. Okay, so where I land on this, I think this camera is it's good. It's a go, right? I don't think this is a total miss. I don't think it's a flop. I think that like some of the reviews are a little overshadowed by like, well, why isn't this the best video camera ever? Or like, why isn't this a professional wedding camera or something? Which like, obviously, it's like doesn't fit into a lot of the categories that like the like YouTubers and certain like camera reviewers are necessarily seeing. But I do think it has a spot.
I agree.
And I think this was a good release.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm generally just happy to see products, and in this case cameras, that are different than what we normally see.
Definitely.
Like, I would rather see this than see, well, here's a Canon R8 except that it says Lumix on the side. Like I want to see different combinations of features, different form factors, trying new things like this new LUT feature. I like things like that. I think it gives us more choices, and them and every other manufacturer will learn from how people end up liking this or not liking it, and that'll inform future cameras. So I think it's great for us as camera podcasters and people who care about this industry. I think it's great to see a camera like this come out, and I probably won't be buying one, but I do think it's cool.
Yeah, same. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't buy one, but I feel like if I was going to spend $1,500, I would buy your XT5.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly say I wouldn't buy one because, like, with the lenses I have and the cameras I have right now, it just doesn't make sense for me specifically. But
I mean, all the cameras that you're interested in are L mount, and if you were like trying to start kind of slowly working your way into L mount,
that's
you
true.
You could get this camera, and then it's like now you have a reason to buy L mount lenses, and which makes it even easier to buy an L mount camera.
I don't know about that, but cool camera. I wish we had time to talk about the GH7 today because I'm so curious.
I can't
about
believe
that.
how over we went.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, Daniel, we're like 90 minutes.
This is a long one.
This may be our longest episode.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
So I guess next time
is going to be another 90 minutes on the GH7 because I have way more to say about that camera.
Yep.
Which means that we have to push the show after that to be finally getting to Leica and Pentax.
Yeah. So
which means the show after that will finally talk about the C400, which Daniel, the C400.
There's a lot of camera news going around right now.
I mean, and by that time they'll probably have released the Z6 Mark II.
Yeah.
And
my gosh,
geez, it's just never like we have so much summer.
It's never
going to
end. The Camera Gear podcast is never going to end. Just like this episode is never going to end.
Just kill it.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us, and if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter at CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.